My name is Nancy Boy. Today is May the 6th, 2011. I am going to interview Colonel Luong Viet at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. This is a part of 500 Oral History project of the Vietnamese American Heritage Foundation. State your name and where were you born?
Yeah, my name is Colonel Viet Luong. I was born in Bien Hoa, Vietnam.
Uh, do you know, still remember about your childhood? Can you tell us a story or that still in your mind and you would like to share?
Well, I remember certain parts of my childhood, particularly, growing up in the war. Even as young as I were during the Tet Offensive, I vividly remember the traumatic images that occurred during there. My house burned down during Tet, and I was only about 2 years old. And my father was fighting with his unit with the South Vietnamese Marine Corps, and had to stay to lead his soldiers in combat. And my mother and the rest of my family had to fend for ourselves. And I remember us. I remember loud noises and artillery, rockets, and houses burning, all close to our residence, and getting out of harm's way. But those things, they're glimpses of the war that I remember. And then there were quite peaceful periods where we enjoyed the relative comfort of living in Vietnam, and enjoy serving in the Boy Scouts, and going to the zoo and going to the movies to watch the latest Bruce Lee movies that were just coming out back then. So a lot of nice images. Remember a lot about my father and what he stood for. He was an officer in the Vietnamese Marine Corps, and fought in combat units throughout his life. So he was one of my mentors, and perhaps probably the biggest positive example for our family.
Where was it you're talking about? Is that in Saigon?
Well, we moved around several places. My dad was in the military, so the family, from what I understand, moved multiple times. Nha Trang is one of those places where we had lived in Bien Hoa. Later on, we moved to Binh Thuy, which is, I guess, on the outskirts of Saigon. And then ultimately, prior to the fall of Saigon, we lived in a military base in officer quarters at near Binh Thuy, and I remember it's a Navy base called Hải Quân, and then Hải Quân Công Xưởng. Yeah.
So you you were exposed to a military atmosphere when you were very young because of your father's profession.
Yeah, not just my father, but all my uncles served in different branches of the Army, in the Rangers, in the Airborne, and then of course my dad in the Vietnamese Marines. So.
What you still remember about your father? That when you talk about him, what you remember about him most?
Well, I remember that he was very stoic. That he's a man of high integrity and honor, and he loved his soldiers as well as his family, because I can tell that in his unit when he was with troops, he was very revered and respected by his troops, and his manner was relatively strict as a commander with the Marines, but when he came home, the fatigues and camouflage comes off, and he was our dad, and I grew up in a household with 7 girls, and being the only boy. I remember my dad would come home, and he'd take off his uniform, and he would play traditional girl games.
Oh, wow.
With my sisters, and jump ropes and things like that. So I remember very fondly those memories back in Vietnam.
What about your mom? Are you very close to your mom?
I'm very close to my mom. My mom is a traditional Vietnamese woman. She lives for the family and for the future of the children of our family. And I always consider her a person of high moral character, because she sacrificed so much for our family, and I think it's because of her that most of us are relatively successful in what we do.
When you said that because of her, most of you successful, and everything. What particular she did, and then you come to that conclusion.
I think the nurturing and the fact that that she had to work most of her life. I think I'm pretty sure, as most Vietnamese women did when they came here, you know, to support the family. And you know, to her, it was always the children first and her husband first before anything for herself. So.
Yeah. You still remember any of that particular story, that like your sad moment, or sometimes, of course, you young, happy and everything, but sometimes you run into a situation that you're very sad, and then what your mom talk to you to get you out of that situation or feeling?
Well, not so much sadness, but but really, you know, a couple moments. I remember getting out of Vietnam. I mean, I was terrified. I was not yet 10. I was 9. You know, in the Western sense, and we were you know trying to get out of Vietnam, and we ended up in Tan Son Nhut Airport, and it was April 1975. Matter of fact, the 29th, the day before the fall, and with some friends of ours, you know, American friends that has gotten the paperwork to get my house out of get my family out of harm's way. And when we got to the airport, we actually got to the airport about probably the 28th, a couple of days before the fall of Saigon. But they had shut down all aircraft flights from there because of the threat from you know, Soviet surface-to-air missiles. And so we were stuck there in Tan Son Nhut Airport, and then we began taking mortar fire from the communist troops who were already present near the airport. And I remember just as a kid, you know, I was cowering below my mom, and you know, she was shielding us with her body and all that stuff. So I always remember that.
Your name is Luong Xuan Viet. So can you tell me a little bit about your family name? And are you Vietnamese, or you? I mean, we have different ethnic of Vietnamese.
Well, I mean, I consider myself 100% Vietnamese, but I also know that Luong is not a you know, traditional Vietnamese surname, but I know for you know, generations that, you know, I can't trace my roots all the way back to, you know, ancient times, but you know, we consider ourselves very Vietnamese.
100%.
You know? Yeah.
Yes. You just talked about your last day in Vietnam. Can you tell us about how your family get out? I mean, you continue to give it the story, if you still can remember how you get out and where you end up at the U.S.
Yeah, well, you know, I stated before, we were at Tan Son Nhut Airport, and we thought we were doomed because you know, all the flights were closed, and you know, we were just we were terrified. We were just waiting for the end to come, and the only thing that has allowed us to you know, to have any sort of composure was really my dad. And he, you know, being a military man, he had great composure, and he was fearless. So it gave us some confidence that we were going to be okay as long as my dad was still with us. And I remember on or about the afternoon or morning of the 29th, you know, some U.S. Marine officers were still present at Tan Son Nhut Airport. And they walked up and they asked for an English speaker. My dad spoke fluent English, so so he, after conversing with these guys, you know, they apparently asked him to gather all the men from Tan Son Nhut Airport to start cleaning up all the debris, because people had just started to, you know, throw away things because they thought, you know, they were in their last days, and they were throwing their suitcases and clothes and belongings all over the tarmac area. And we were asked by the U.S. Marines to clear that because they were bringing in helicopters from the you know, from the 6th Fleet, Navy 6th Fleet, to come in to extract the last remnants of Vietnamese and you know, yeah, I didn't see Americans so much, but maybe you know, families of Americans who were Vietnamese descent. And you know, there were some altercations. You know, people didn't like getting bossed around by, because my dad was in civilian clothes. So I remember him, you know, using his weapon to actually threaten some of the guys to, you know, help out. And then they began clearing the runway. And then that evening, I think, you know, roughly the 28th, 29th, over 2 days, they started an evacuation. They were using, Marine Corps helicopter from the 6th Fleet. And if you look at, historical documents, it would tell you that, it was a deliberate operation to extract all the Vietnamese out that they could have from both the embassy and the airport, and it's called Operation Frequent Wind.
Right.
And we were extracted from Tan Son Nhut onto the USS Hancock, where we sailed for about 2 to 3 days. Ended up processing through Guam at Clark Air Base, subsequently in Guam, and then from Guam we went to Fort Chaffee, Arkansas, which is very close to here, and we were at Fort Chaffee, Arkansas for approximately 3 months or so, and after that we had some opportunities to be sponsored to several places around the U.S. Now a lot of my father's friends were Marine Corps U.S. advisors, and they were mostly colonels in the U.S. Marine at that time. We had opportunities to go to many other places. He also had an opportunity to go to France, but he had been on several training missions and had taken several courses in the U.S., both in Quantico, Virginia, and San Diego, California, being a Marine officer. And I think he absolutely made the right decision by choosing to go to California, because he thought that it afforded the best chances for assimilation as well as upward mobility. So we ended up in California, and pretty much stayed ever since.
Yeah. You mentioned about your family were transported to Guam, and you were about 9 or 10 years old at that time. Do you remember any about your time at Guam? What it was like?
I remember everything about it, because I think when one goes through a traumatic experience like that, first it was relief, because when we landed on the U.S. Hancock, most Vietnamese with no military background did not even know where we were, and they asked around, and I remember some of my sisters asking my dad, where were we? We thought we were on an island because the ship was so big and we were coming out, and he says, well, we're on the USS Hancock, one of the most powerful naval vessels in the world, and that means that nothing can harm you. We were very relieved, but at the same time, that sense of relief and exhilaration lasted for maybe a few days, but as you go through a series of refugee camps, you start to begin to wonder, what's going on with your friends and families back in Vietnam, what's in store for your future, and you really become a person without any identity, so there was a great sense of loss. As a kid, I didn't necessarily feel all those, sentimental feelings, but I was saddened because I saw sadness in my parents. Yeah.
I'm sorry that bring back your sad memory, but like you just mentioned that your dad was a major in Marine Corps, and he came to U.S. Many times for training, and probably under him many soldiers work for him and everything, and now suddenly in at Guam he become nobody, and no home, no career, not even a country. You still remember how he coped with all that, how he overcome all that?
I think it would have to be incredibly difficult for him, but he never shared that. I think my dad's always been a very stoic person. He's always been a very positive person and very driven individual, and so I know it had to be pretty hard for him to because when the country fell, he was actually the special assistant to General Khan, the commandant of the Marine Corps, and then later on became chief of staff of the Vietnamese Army. So he was in a pretty important position. But I think a couple of things. I mean, there was a sense of bitterness, some sense of guilt, because he's lost a lot of friends and had to leave our country, and because he didn't want to leave. I mean, it was a choice between, do I save my family, or do I stay and fight. And it was, I remember even the discussions between my mom and dad, and I hear my mom telling him, hey, look, you're a staff officer, you're the assistant to the commandant of the Marine Corps, you're not a battalion commander that, and you don't have, really the obligation to stay. But because his first choice was, well, I'm just going to flee to the jungles and keep on fighting. Coming to the States, I think he was struggling with that. But a lot of he obviously didn't share that with me. But I can tell, I used to listen to conversations between him and my mom, and then when we got to the States, between him and his friends, and struggling to make a living. But he was very proud because he I didn't know anything about the all the civic programs and aid programs that they had going on. But I remember telling my mom that he's like, hey, we're gonna be self-sufficient. And so he started working, and it wasn't enough money to, my mom smoked though. She's a traditional housewife. She had very little formal education growing up in North Vietnam, but she was a good wife and good mother. So the only thing that she was capable of doing is menial jobs and stuff like that, but she had to do some of that, working at fast food places and stuff like that, to augment the income. And my father was a security guard because all he knew was, besides being a pretty learned individual, that was the quickest job that he could have gotten. So they worked fairly hard for us.
Come to U.S. and have 8 children, and then have no profession beside military training. Like you said that he have to work labor job to support family. Do you can